Today on the Jacob Buehrer Show, I get to interview only the second returning guest, Mr. Chris Elmore. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Jacob. It's good to be back on the show. I remember when you were, just starting out, and now you've got all these great guests, so I'm happy to be back on the show with you today.
Isn't your favorite guest that I've interviewed U.S. Senator Todd Young?
I'm not going to say who my favorite was, although I really liked your interview with Mitch Daniels because, we're both Purdue students. This is actually my last day as doing in-person classes at Purdue, but I'm all in for Mitch Daniels, so I'd say that.
For sure. This is also kind of Chris's senior eggs interview, and I said, good luck on your next Evador, which you'll talk about.
Sure.
He was like, I'd love to come on the podcast one more time.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Here we are. Let me just move this a little bit. So take us through a little bit. Of course, me and you grew up very involved in politics.
Sure.
You went to IU to start with.
Yeah.
You're at Purdue and you're graduating early. What's next for you? And then I'll get into some fun topics.
Yeah, sure. So actually, I accepted a job about 2 or 3 months ago to go and work with the Texas Attorney General's office for Ken Paxton. So in 18 days, I'll be driving down to Austin, moving into my new apartment, and I'll start on May 15th working as a special researcher for the legal strategy department. So basically my job is going to be, as they're preparing cases and stuff, I'll help to find precedent and context for those cases, and I'll basically just do whatever the Attorney General's office needs me to do. So I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited to continue, the fight for conservative policy and really to fight back against this oppressive Biden administration and all their legal nonsense that they have pushed through. So many of their executive actions have been just absurd, and really there's no better fighter against that than state attorney general's offices.
For sure. And take us through a little bit. One thing I've always known about you is you like politics, but specifically more so law.
Yeah.
You just took a con law course at Purdue.
Yeah.
So how did law kind of come up for you as your choice topic?
Well, I think that actually, so you kind of mentioned this. I started off at IU, and I started Indiana University, and I didn't make it through a full semester. I got kind of sick, and I had to withdraw, and then I restarted at Purdue. But actually, when I was at IU, I was actually a business major, and I knew I was going to switch majors within 3 weeks. It wasn't my cup of tea, but I'd had some, members of my family who had run businesses previously, and so there was kind of that heritage there and that kind of familial experience with it. But really, I knew that I wanted to go and study political science, and that I really wasn't interested at this time in studying economics and business administration. I wanted to understand, how politics impact and how politics can serve people and how our political systems can get better because they've gotten pretty insane lately. And I wanted to learn about, how, and I kind of wanted to see how law played into that. So, I didn't want to just go and get a political science bachelor's. I knew that I wanted to do something a little more technical, a little more specialized, and so that's how law came to be a particular idea. I was considering for a while just getting a master's in something like public policy and then going and working in conservative policy or working in campaigns. But I took a course first semester this year, a con law course like you mentioned, and I fell in love with it. And I have had no family ever, no one who's ever been involved in law in my family. And so sitting in on this class, it was like opening Pandora's box for me. It was a whole new world of exploring a completely different way of looking at modern day issues and political issues. And so I took that and I was like, I'm all in. I got to go to law school. And so I started looking for jobs that would allow me to kind of work in the policy world, but really with a slant towards legal. And so that's how I got this job, or how I started looking for this job.
Interesting. And something that is really fascinating about Chris, and if you've listened to our first episode, which I'm sure there's probably 20 or 30 of you that listened all the way back then, and a lot of new people today, is when I had interviewed you before, you guys had U.S. Senator Todd Young that year, if I recall, as your speaker. The year before that, when you led high school Republicans, you had the Speaker of the State Assembly.
Right.
And this past year, when you took over college Republicans, you upped it up times about 100 when you had former Vice President Mike Pence, somebody who I'm trying to get on the show, ironically. So, take us through, how have you been able to, as a young person, accomplish so much, things like that? And that's just one thing that Chris has accomplished with organizations, by bringing in more Republicans, like you said,
Right.
but also putting on some big events. So how have you been able to accomplish so much at such a young age?
Well, first off, I'm humbled that you say that. It sometimes it feels weird for me at certain events because some people say things like that sometimes, and I never really know how to respond. But I guess I would say that if you're gonna call what I've done successful, which I think everything's a work in progress. I think that, you just got to keep grinding, and you have to keep showing up at events, and you have to keep talking with more people, set up those individual coffee meetings, set up those lunches, network as much as you possibly can, and it'll open so many doors for you. But also beyond that, you have to go and you have to put in the work, right? So, I mean, for years when I was in high school, I did a lot of the networking, the breakfasts, the dinners, whatever. But you have to be able to show that you're devoted to it more than just showing up for the social events. You got to go hit the doors, make the phone calls, do what a campaign, volunteer, help your local party. And so through enough of doing that, I think that I built up enough of a reputation that said that, okay, if Chris Elmore says he's going to help out with something, you can rely on him to help out. And people will remember that when you need something. So you're right. The very first dinner that we hosted when I was head of high school Republicans was with Speaker Todd Houston. And, he is a state rep in Fishers.
And the state auditor.
Yeah, and the state auditor. That's
Special
right.
thanks to Goodrich who put on that event.
Yeah, but I was able to kind of leverage connections that I had made through volunteering with, like, the local, my local House representatives to be able to make that happen. When we had Todd Young the following year, well, we'd built up a lot of connections between high school Republicans and Todd Young's office through sending out our high school Republican volunteers to go door to door on his behalf. And so
an attorney came for the night and spoke.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I wouldn't call it necessarily like quid pro quo,
yeah.
Right? But I mean, there's definitely some, like, if you can demonstrate that you're committed to the cause and that you want to help benefit them, then it's in their best interest to want you to succeed, right? So I think that, it's that continuous climb of being able to say, we have a common interest, we want to work and help us continue to grow our organization. And I think that that's probably where a lot of the success comes from. And I think that just having this mindset has, I think that's why they elected me. I mean, I guess I don't know, but I would imagine this is why they elected me to be head of the college Republicans too. And I think that it's benefited myself, absolutely, and benefited the organizations I've been a part of.
For sure, because I don't know another person that would have gotten somebody like former Vice President Mike Pence to come out and speak.
Well, that was really lucky, and I got to say, I had a close friend who was a lobbyist, actually, who helped me out in high school Republicans, who was pretty connected with Pence. And so just knowing that guy was a huge help. But I never would have known him if I hadn't been out there getting involved, doing the good work for the party.
For sure. No, that's a very valid thing. And I think away from politics, that's true in business. The networking, being a good networker doesn't matter what you do. When I try to get interviews, I kind of have to mention who I've had on. That's networking right there. So it doesn't matter if it's... it feels weird talking this much because normally this is a side conversation.
Yeah.
But your networking point, I think, is something that I see as someone who's even 19, and I've seen that from you.
Yeah.
That networking thing, and now you're 22.
I will turn 22 a week from today.
Well, happy early birthday.
Thank you.
This is a birthday podcast, too. Happy birthday, Chris.
I guess so, yeah.
So, yeah. But networking is a very important thing, like you mentioned, and now you can see through him. I mean, all your dinner guests were great, but you also hosted a radio show in high school where you had on the Carmel Mayor, things like that. So networking was a big step in it for sure.
Yeah, and I think that, gosh, I kind of put the radio show out of my mind. I haven't done that in a long time, but yeah, I hosted that show too, and maybe that was another way that I was able to kind of extend an olive branch and say, hey, look, I'd love to get you in front of a group of students to so that they can understand what you're all about, our listeners can understand what you're about, and I think that getting that and I offered that not just to Republicans, I offered that to Democrats too. But I think that kind of helped maintain that reputation, and certainly, like you're talking about, it helped with the networking immensely.
For sure. And now let's get into some fun topics, because everyone has heard networking's important.
Yep.
A lot of people in Indiana politics respect you, of course. I am not going to say any adults on air, but I can tell you plenty off camera that respect you a lot.
Thanks.
So I guess those are your plans after you leave Purdue.
That's the plan. So we'll see. I'm going to go to law school probably after a year, and we will be back in Indiana soon.
You heard it. So there will be a part 3 of this as well.
Yeah, there you go. When I get back. There you go.
Okay, looks like I will still have a guest coming on my show in a year, so there will be at least one episode. Let's get into some fun things now because, well, you're a fun person. Star Wars.
Yeah.
You're a big Star Wars fan. Kind of a quick fireball question, so you don't got to elaborate too much on it, but what's your favorite Star Wars?
Oh, I gotta say it's Empire Strikes Back. I don't know.
I don't know my Star Wars history at all.
Oh, you don't know?
No.
Have you seen the movies?
Like 1 or 2.
Oh my gosh!
I know who Yoda is. I know.
You know who Yoda is?
Yeah.
Well, okay, I guess that's good. Well, so it's the second movie. It's widely regarded as the best, and maybe the best. One of the few times that the sequel might be better than the original. And I just think it's fantastic. It's the movie where it's revealed that Darth Vader is Luke's father, and that there is this fall from grace for his father, and it's just a beautiful story. And I think that it really, it speaks to the human condition really well, because Luke Skywalker is fighting this temptation.
I forgot about him.
Right. He's fighting this temptation to turn to the dark side and have things flow easier through him, and he's trying to practice wisdom and strength. And then he finds out that that his arch nemesis is his own father.
I know, that was crazy.
It's nuts. So I think that's probably my favorite Star Wars movie.
Interesting.
Also, I'm a romantic, so I like the Han and Leia, romance that gets developed throughout that movie.
Maybe I can get Harrison Ford on.
Sorry?
I said maybe I can get Harrison Ford on.
I think you should reach out. Although apparently I don't think he doesn't like to do many interviews about Star Wars.
He also doesn't like doing interviews about politics. Dan Quayle.
Yo, he's not?
No, I said I was his only interview last year.
Whoa,
and he
really?
definitely got invited on some other shows. So
wow,
maybe it was because I texted him directly, and he felt like, oh, if I'm in this interview, this kid could send my number to somebody.
He felt nervous.
Not that anybody in this entire school besides 5 people know who he is, which I shouldn't probably be saying that, but we're far enough through the episode, so
yeah, there you go.
Love Vice President Dan Quayle, though. Never forget that. So if he is still listening, really love what you did for my show, and he'll always be my first former vice president to come on.
But not the last.
Hopefully not. Kamala Harris, no.
No.
I've had
maybe next January.
Democrats.
Maybe next January.
I've had on the former Democratic nominee for president, and Joe Lieberman, rest in peace.
I saw that. Yeah.
Some Democrats like me, but take me through a little bit, Chris. Who's your favorite country singer? You're going to a place. Favorite country singer and favorite comedian. I feel like that's a good one.
That is good.
I'll let you name 2 of each. 2 of your favorites.
2 of each.
No 3, but 2.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go from number 2 and number 1.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start with country. I gotta say, my number 2 favorite country artist.
The guy who throws a chair.
Probably the guy who throws the chair, Morgan Wallen. Big fan. When I was in high school, still, all my best friends and we did a road trip from Indianapolis to Siesta Key and back, and we listened to Sand in My Boots over 30 times. We listened to Feathered Indians like 40 times, but Morgan Wallen was kind of our guy for that whole week, and it's still kind of our go-to when we're all getting together. So Morgan Wallen, probably my number 2. Number 1.
Can you agree that when he threw chairs was really stupid?
It was, yeah. I don't know what he was thinking. So, You know,
he just
I
had
hope
a
he
Coke
doesn't.
Zero.
Yeah, he had a lot of Coke Zeros.
Whose bar was he at? He was at a country singer's bar.
He was at the Chiefs Bar, which is Eric Church's bar on I think it's on Broadway in Nashville.
And you've been to Nashville, so
I've been I have not been to Chiefs, I don't think, but I would like to go. It seems cool.
Interesting. And then number one,
King of Country Music, George Strait, hands down. I mean, he's just always been my favorite, or for the last 10 years, he's been my favorite, I guess.
if he came to this podcast studio that we're in, will you come all the way back from Texas? For
I
an
would
interview?
fly back from Texas to
Wow.
meet George Strait for sure. I'm seeing him next Saturday. He's playing in Indianapolis with Chris Stapleton and
Lucas
Little
Oil
Big
Stadium.
Town. Yeah. So I've seen him one time or two times in concert.
You won't see it, and I'm just going to say this because I don't care as the truth. You won't see as many blonde girls at Chris Stapleton's concert as you would see at Morgan Wallen.
That's probably true. It's probably true. And I think that, George Strait definitely is appealing to the older generation for sure. And so I don't think I'm necessarily his key demographic, but I love him. I mean, probably the most emotional I've ever been when hearing a song was when I heard "I Can Still Make Cheyenne" for the first time. And it's a great song. It's about the rodeo guy comes back home. No, he doesn't come back home. He's on his way back home. He calls his girlfriend to check in, and she says, "I've left you because you're never home, and you're always off, rolling around in the rodeo. And how you expect me to be, to hold this relationship?" And he's just like, "All right, well, I guess that's it. I'm going to miss you, but maybe I can still make the Cheyenne rodeo." And it's really sad, and it's powerful. And so that was when I knew George Strait's a guy I'm going to be listening to the rest of my life. And he always is in my top 5 for Spotify. For 6 years in a row, he was my number 1 Spotify.
Didn't you have an
most
Old
listened
Dominion
to.
on your Spotify list?
I did. I think
I have
so.
a good memory.
There you go. Yeah, I think I did last year, 2 years
And one
ago.
other thing that's really sad about country music is, and by the way, I like a lot of country, but when I see girls on Hinge and dating apps and I start talking to them, sorry, here comes a little pissed off Jacob
There you
podcaster
go.
moment. You got me going now.
Hell yeah.
I don't expect, somebody to maybe know who Lee Greenwood is. I love Lee Greenwood, but I get it unless you're a conservative. You probably haven't heard the song God Bless the USA.
Great song.
But a girl who was like, I like Morgan Wallen, I was like, have you heard of Willie Nelson? No. I don't care that Willie Nelson was 30 years before Morgan Wallen. Willie Nelson can still get the same freaking crowd. You don't know who
Yeah.
Willie Nelson is, and you say you like country. I get it's a country pop era like Luke Combs,
Yeah.
Morgan Wallen.
But it is absurd.
But you should still know who
Yeah.
Willie Nelson is, or George Strait,
Yeah.
or Alan Jackson, people like that, or Big and Rich. So, really
you don't
sad.
have to listen to them all the time, but you should know who they
Yeah,
are.
if you'd like Morgan Wallen, that'd be like saying I don't know who Madonna is before Taylor Swift.
It's a good point. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah,
So those were my country. Man,
comedy now.
Comedy is really
And
difficult.
yes, those girls who might be listening to this, that's targeted towards you if you do get this far. Not that you'll probably watch an interview like this, but if you do, don't say you like country if you don't know who Willie Nelson or George Strait is.
You tell him, Jacob.
I don't know if I do. Congrats on making it this far in an interview.
Hey, I'm having a great time.
Comedian, though.
Comedian.
We don't want to get me shadow banned with
Yeah.
girls who get offended by that.
Yeah. Okay, number 2, I'm going to go with Tim Dillon. He's this awesome comedian. He's very crude. But he's actually kind of become really famous in the last couple years. He got featured on Rogan, and his career is just blown up. I've seen him on tour twice so far. I hope to see him again. But he's just like this really crude guy who he actually went to school for poli-sci. Thought he was going to run for Congress and stuff. And he just decided he liked
Is he
to
the guy behind the Babylon Bee?
No, that's I don't remember
Dylan.
his name.
There's some guy named Dylan.
But yeah, different
That's
guy.
some good comedy,
but he's
too.
great too. So yeah,
Seth
I'd say
Dillon. Seth Dillon.
Seth Dillon, that's right. But Tim Dillon, great, hilarious, tons of great political comedy. I love him. Ah, gosh, number 1 is really difficult. I mean,
There's a guy named Nick Yax who does some comedy.
he does do some comedy. Oh man, this one's real tough. You know what?
I hope Nick makes it this far.
It's a guy named William Montgomery. He's known as the Big Red Machine, and he's a regular on the Kill Tony podcast, which is like the fundamental comedy podcast.
He's your favorite.
He's my favorite. He comes out in these insane outfits and he just screams at the audience. He's great. It was between him and Brian Holtzman. They're both fantastic.
Is Joe Rogan the top 10 on your list?
Oh, absolutely.
Top
sure.
5?
But I don't want to be too mainstream and say Joe Rogan is my favorite. But he's my favorite podcast to listen to 100%.
Not my show?
Wow.
It's okay. If I get
come out with
George Strait.
Yeah, there you go. Or if you come out with a 3-hour podcast with someone really famous, I'll listen to it.
For sure.
You got it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Donald Trump.
Yeah, I'll listen to that.
Which leads into our next one. No, Trump was not coming on my show. Although I did have on one of his campaign advisors. If you look on Wikipedia, I've had on Boris Epstein.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, so it was not a high viewer one, but maybe at least moving to Trump, I don't know.
Yeah.
Boris, if you're still listening this far, I hope you can get me in touch. But notice, Chris loves comedy, so normally I don't get to have these conversations with guests. I'm not going to be like bringing up some old interview, but because Chris isn't just a quarterback who comes on my show for 5 minutes and then he leaves. You've seen so much in both of our lives, so that's why having this conversation is totally different compared to a different type of interview. And that's what I love about this one is it's a different type of podcast with you. It always is different. So let's get into the last topic: Trump versus Biden.
Where do we start? What do you want to know?
Let's just get out of the way.
Dude, I think he's going to win.
2 things. Number 1, RFK Jr. is going to take more votes from Trump than Biden. And, followed by that, I think it's a freaking coin toss for who's going to win.
So, let's start with your first contention. So, the data is pretty unclear, actually, about who RFK
It goes back and forth.
Goes back and forth, but if you dive into the crosstabs of the most recent
50-50.
one, it's probably about even, right, who RFK eats from. But that might have pretty substantial effects on the total vote numbers between Trump and Biden. But really, I think that the key, if we're looking at third parties, is look at the other third-party candidates.
Cornel West.
Cornel West. Jill
Stein. That's my favorite. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, there hasn't really been, from my understanding, there isn't a prominent libertarian running yet. But, between the Green Party and Cornel West, I don't even remember what party he's officially running under now, you've got 3 left-leaning candidates plus RFK who could potentially, who could potentially split that vote. I mean, not that they're going to split it very much, but if Cornel West gets 1% in Pennsylvania or 1% in Georgia or 1% anywhere, it could flip the whole friggin' election.
Right, and RFK is now about 7 to 8%. At one point, it was 15.
But here's the other thing: Biden is not popular with the progressive base, right? And this Palestine stuff isn't going away, and the progressives are losing.
You saw it in Dearborn in the Michigan primary.
There you go. And so he's continually trying to appease that base. But that puts him on the fringe with some independent voters who could swing to Trump or to RFK. I'm interested in seeing how that trend continues to develop because I was thinking this yesterday. I'm kind of feeling right now how I felt in 2018 with the Kavanaugh stuff. It feels like it's continuously getting crazier and crazier, and I don't know if there's enough administrative control from the Biden administration to really flip the narrative on this thing yet. So, I mean, we'll have to see how that continues to develop. But progressives aren't happy with Joe Biden. No. Now, look at Trump's base. Yes, there are Republicans who are dissatisfied.
And let's just, sorry to interrupt for a second, how there are some Democrats, like in Michigan, Dearborn areas like that are heavily Muslim, that will not be supporting Joe Biden. There are also people in our state that will probably still go 15 or 20%, maybe not 20%, but 15% that will go for Nikki Haley in 2 weeks since she's still on the primary ballot in Indiana. And that's still a little protest vote. And those 15% who might vote for Haley could also be a threat to Trump.
Right. So that's the other question is how much of Trump's base is splintering? And so then the question is, well, we know everyone who's been a Trump supporter or who is a Trump supporter is coming out, and they're probably coming out on election day, and they're voting for Donald Trump, or they're voting early or whatever. Do the moderate Republicans who seemingly have problems with Trump's legal baggage or whatever, do they defect to Biden or to RFK? I don't really see them doing either of those. If anything, I just see them maybe staying home or not voting for president. I think that I think a lot could change, but I think that the risk of running Biden for 4 more years or electing someone with some unknowns like RFK, I think that is a worse option for most moderate Republicans than either voting for Trump or not voting in the presidential and just voting down ballot Republican or however they want and just not voting presidentially. So I think, it'll take time to dole out these trends, but, I was listening to a podcast with the chair of the RNC last night, and he's from North Carolina, ran the North Carolina GOP for years, has kind of made North Carolina into more of a reliably red state in the last few cycles, and they're building out a fantastic Get Out the Vote program and a Protect the Vote program that is going to ensure that there are no state law changes like there were in 2020, or that voters will have an opportunity to go vote. And they're also launching, and this is great, a Bank the Vote program where they're going to be pushing for early voting or absentee if necessary, because it's all about just getting those Republican votes in. And so I think with straight-headed leadership like that at the top, I think that the party's in a pretty powerful position for November.
For sure. Good point. So then, real quick, who's winning if the election is held, as it's planned, 6 or 7 months from today?
Well, that's a tough one. I think that what you said was absolutely right. I think it's a coin toss.
Literally, I'm not just saying that because I don't want to pick a side and offend people on either side, Democrat or Republican friends. It's a freaking coin.
I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was just talking about.
Those split congressional districts are going to be a fun one to watch, too.
Yeah, no kidding.
But I think it'll come down to more so the 3 states as always. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia. I think that the way things are looking right now, it looks pretty good for Trump. But, I thought things looked pretty good for him in 2020. And he lost. So I don't know where this goes. So I can't. I'd have to say probably Trump, but very cautiously, right? As in, I wouldn't be shocked at all if it went the other way, because America is a trending liberal country, and that is the fact.
I don't even know if I would say we're trending liberal. I think we're becoming more polarized every single day. I think it's becoming pretty 50-50. I mean, the 2020 election was only decided by 45,000 votes across the battleground states. I mean, Biden won a popular vote, but within our system, he only won by 45,000 votes in the battleground states.
Yeah. It's
insane. I mean, that's smaller. That's smaller than the city I live in, Carmel.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
For sure.
So I think it's a coin toss.
That's a very valid point. Well, Chris, it's always a pleasure to have you on. I think we got to end it on that because, well, you're a lot of things to me, but you're working in politics still. So I think to end it on a political big question like that is a fun way to end it. Wish you all the best in Texas, and there's going to be a part 3 coming.
Yes.
We'll get to talk about after the presidential election, actually.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Maybe a year after, maybe 5 months after, but I look forward to it. So
sounds
the
good, man.
pleasure's always mine.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.